a pretty safe place in a structure as big as DHL. I was one of the corporate executives for the group. I was COO for Asia Pacific, corporate executive within the DHL management group, on a path to probably another 2 promotions before I retired around about 60, and probably slid into the world of consultancy or something. And I was really bored, really bored, and felt very unfulfilled, especially my last 18 months. I've been working in e-commerce and trying to get large pieces of the DHL machine to switch direction and understand that the world was changing in supply chain, that logistics was changing dramatically underneath them, and that the world of the internet and internet shopping was driving massive differentiation into the market. And DHL was just too big to listen. So I started to look around. I was working heavily with marketplaces like Alibaba and eBay and Amazon. I'd worked extensively with brands trying to take themselves online, and I got really interested in that side of things. A friend introduced me to Roger then, and said, look, you need to go talk to this guy because he'll help you figure out, what it is you're trying to do, and who you want to talk to. So I've worked with business coaches before. I've had 2 business coaches in my working life, and I really liked the experience, but was reluctant to go to just another business coach because I've kind of done that, and you never know everything. So I'm not suggesting for 1 second that I am at the end of that journey, but not ready to take on another coach that was going to tell me pretty much what I've already heard. So was a little bit reticent, I think is probably the best word, when I met Roger. But after about the first 10 minutes, realized that he was a very different animal, and was trying to achieve something very different with persona. So this is probably, wow, over a year ago, I would say, I first met Roger. So we started a journey then that said, well, actually, before you can go anywhere, you've got to figure out where you're going and what you want to do. And this started the whole discussion about being personal at work and, work needing to really align with your own beliefs or your own ideals. And if you're going to enjoy it, it's got to be something that's meaningful to you. And that's kind of how the whole journey and the relationship and the subsequent friendship with Roger all began. Is that a broad enough overview for you?
Yeah, no. And it's interesting to hear you first found out or met Roger through word of mouth. So there wasn't any marketing involved other than just his good name, good reputation.
Correct.
Was the person who referred you a client or a friend of his?
The person that recommended me was about to be a client of his.
Okay, interesting. And then, so I understand that you have done your own sort of transformation plan, brand book, but you've also started working with your team now to do some of the workshops and recruitment through Persona.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about like the decision to just continue down this road. Was it sort of like, I see such value from this myself that I think my team could benefit from it. How did you sort of see the growth from being a personal client to being almost a corporate client of theirs progressing?
Sure. So, I mean, what Roger's trying to do and some of the things that we talked about and discussed during my own coaching really struck a chord with me, and it made me realise what the gap had been and why I was unhappy at DHL. So in discussing all of that with him and going through a couple of journeys with him as I found the role of brand path, which kind of changed the dynamic of our relationship, I realised that to be able to bring a culture to a company, probably the best way to use some of the same beliefs and some of the same approaches that Roger takes. It's a very individual, very different way of applying some of it is standard stuff from the market, but he applies it in a very different way. So BrandPath and its associate group of companies is very, although some of the business is over 15 years old, what we're trying to do now is only 6 months old. So it's a great opportunity to rebase the thinking of the company, rebase the management team in terms of why they're doing some of the things that they're doing. And to be honest, it also helped Roger out because he was just starting to launch these workshops. So we kind of used our one as a bit of a toe in the water as well. So we tried some stuff, and I think he had some good takeaways in terms of things that worked, things that weren't so successful, and things to take into other workshops. But in terms of the thinking behind it, it's very much to follow the philosophy of, and it allows me to put into practice some of the things that I've talked about and learned with Roger.
Interesting. So it's almost like a brand building exercise for your company, in addition to just helping find the right employees and onboard them.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And so I'm interested to hear sort of your feedback. You mentioned you gave him feedback about what could be improved. Like, what were some of the comments that you feel like would make their programs even more successful than they were now, or what were some of the pain points that you think they could solve?
Wow. I think that's a really hard question to answer because part of what Roger and the coaching world at large is trying to do is pretty much impossible, which is to apply the same basic principles to every scenario. And I think part of, how do I put this without going on for about an hour? So why it works with an individual is you spend a large amount of time together and you share a lot more things individually than you would probably, unless you go really far into the startup world, than you ever would with a management team. People are very guarded, and especially here in Asia, and especially here in Hong Kong, with the more Chinese influence, people are very guarded about their personality and their personal life, their personal feelings. They're very guarded about speaking out of turn and possibly upsetting somebody. So it's very, very hard to do when you are dropped in, you know, with not a lot of interaction with that team. So what Roger and I talked about is, the takeaway for me was, how do you build a relationship with a company as well as you build it with the individual? Now, obviously, that's difficult because it involves a lot of time and it's not cheap. But there's a way through this somewhere that allows somebody like Roger to build a relationship with the management team as well as the, you know, I guess in my case, the head of the business. Now, whether that means that he has a light version of some of his coaching and a easy to access version of some of the methodology and the ideology that he uses, that he then has a smaller team behind him that spends probably a 2-week period in and out of the company he's about to go coach. And because you need that level of information and you need that depth of understanding of the individuals to put across what Roger's trying to do. And I don't think you can do it in a workshop. There isn't the time and there isn't the depth of relationship that you need to do what he achieved with me and what I wanted to, and what I still want to achieve with my management team. But it's a longer-term commitment, and that probably is going to be a financial barrier for some companies as well. The content is, I still believe in the content. I still believe in the whole make work personal theory, if you want to call it that. And using that approach and using that thought process really helps people understand why they're doing the things that they're doing and what they could do better, what they could do differently. In some cases, and I've had it in one of my teams, they actually make the decision that I made at DHL and decide to leave because they've realised that they've been at the company too long, or the culture that's coming is not for them, or they've got a different calling. And post that set of workings that we did with Roger, I've actually lost one of my management team. I've resigned. But for the right reasons. He's come to me and explained to me that what he's doing and why he's doing it, and it's exactly the same reason that I left DHL. And that's maybe an outcome that I hadn't considered, foolishly. going into it is that obviously it could have the same effect that it had on me. But I see that still as a good thing. I'd rather have somebody use that experience and take themselves forward than sit in the corner of the office doing something they hate every day.
Yeah. I think that's a bit scary, though. Roger did mention that he's afraid of that. You know, it's tough when you mention the financial barrier. First of all, trying to figure out how to quantify or put a value against this type of really intensive work with your team, and then also how to communicate the dangers or the, as you put it, it's a positive actually outcome that you have people leave who aren't really meant to be there, but the potential pitfalls of undergoing this process. If you had to explain sort of the value to another company, how would you articulate that, thinking about those barriers?
It's hard, right? One of the things that I know, Roger, and unfortunately part of my process was to leave Singapore, which was good because it was a change and it was a good move, but it meant that I kind of lost touch with Roger's progress because I know he's been trying to put together this persona community or this alumni of persona, right? Which I think is, and I've lost track a little bit because I've been really busy here, but I think that's one way that it works really well. I mean, I've recommended Roger to a number of people, right? Again, I really believe in what he's trying to do, and I believe in him. So I think building a community, both virtual and physical, around persona and what it does is really, really important. And part of Roger's brief, I think, has to be that anybody that works with him has to sign up for being a salesperson for persona, right? And that's to help him out and agree to be part of this alumni as much as possible. Because I think that's one of the ways that people can really spend time with either other people that have worked with Roger or potential people that Roger wants to work with, or people that I think will value from what Roger does. Maybe customers that I want to work with that could be a good cultural fit, or other companies that I work alongside that I feel would benefit from following a cultural process the same. I think that's one way. I think the other way is that when Roger's got executives that he's working with, packaging what he's doing into recruitment, coaching, talent workshops, talent retention. I take back the word recruitment because I think it's a dead word that needs to go away. But talent sourcing, talent pooling, all that kind of stuff I think needs to come probably as the gold package from Roger that says, I'll work with a corporation and you pay me almost like a monthly fee or a retainer, and you get me for 12 months. And we work out a pack of all these things that we do. The number at the bottom right-hand corner is probably quite high, but I think if there's a way he can commercialize or productize that suite of things that he's capable of and has access to, then companies like BrandPath and maybe larger will buy into it. I think the other side of his opportunity is to work with, and I've seen it more now I've joined BrandPath, but to work with startups and to work with companies that have probably just got their Series B funding or have just come out of funding rounds, now have cash to spend. They need to grow, they need people, they need to know the right people, and generally what I'm seeing with startups is that these are really cool entrepreneurs, they have great ideas, they are generally very bright, but they're really bad at people management and they're really bad at interviewing people because they try and interview and try and look for people that are like them. In essence, that's the wrong for them to employ. So I think the other package that Persona could take to market is this this help to startups or this outreach for startups. I'm trying to do it in a similar vein, but for what we do, which is taking brands online, helping them market online, helping them to do omnichannel if they wish to go that route, and then to do the distribution, the payment, the physical logistics. So, we're taking small brands that have just got their funding and have just gone into manufacturing process, and we're helping them to go global eventually is our aim. So seeing that work from our side, It's not massively profitable, but it gives you a great brand and it gives you a really good name in the market. If you can then tie that to some larger organisations that you have a longer-term commitment with, I think you've got a business plan.
That's really interesting, the really interesting parallel, because I've heard so many times, like, don't grow too fast, or there's dangers in sort of growing too fast for these startups to either have, like, a culture built around a founder, or a culture that risks sort of being watered down if they try to hire and they're on just sort of like a success-driven hiring spree. They necessarily don't get the right people, and there's potential to run into trouble there. I think that's a really interesting market, because then, of course, you can attach yourself from the beginning as sort of the accelerator of some really interesting success stories.
Yeah, exactly, and it's exactly the point that I'm trying to drive with BrandPath, is that if you can pick up a brand almost in its birth. Some of them will fall by the wayside. Some of them will go on to do something else. Out there somewhere is the next iPhone or the next GoPro, right? And that's what I'm trying to find. I want to be on the coattails of the next one of those. And I think Roger could do the same. And I honestly, and I'm not saying it because Roger and I are friends as well. I'm not saying it because of that. I truly believe in what he's doing, and I think it can make a huge difference to companies. But the thing about the alumni is it's helping people engage, right? Because there's so much, I guess there's so much negativity around this kind of thing, right? And people are a bit, it's all a bit hippie, it's all a bit soft, it's not going to help me drive my numbers. If he's got business cases that says, he's worked with people like me and I've successfully moved into a whole different area of business. I've brought him into my company and we took a big step forward and we lost somebody, but that person's gone off to do bigger and better things, right? He needs those case studies as well and people to talk for him to help get over that barrier and that fear of this is just not something for companies. And that probably is truer of the larger organisations who've got big, unwieldy HR departments that have got, kind of preset training in their mind. They've got preset paths through the business. That's going to be harder to break. So probably it's the mid to growing, and that just coming out of starter, B-series funding groups, got cash in the bank. What am I going to do with it? I think those are probably the groups that there is targets.
It's interesting also because I think one thing you mentioned is sort of seeing recruitment as an integral part of this coaching process for a company, and we've heard conflicting thoughts on that. Like some people have said that they feel like the recruitment side of it should be separate, or that there are risks involved with it being integrated, but you see them as like fundamentally linked almost.
I think if you're going to do this, if you're going to go wholeheartedly for this as a business, then it's intrinsically linked, because by using the tools and following the thoughts and processes that you learn with Roger, then your business starts to feel that way, right? And I'll give you a really good example. Is that although I haven't used Roger to find me some people, because he hasn't really got a network in Hong Kong at the moment, and the people I need are Hong Kong-based, and they're probably a bit low level for what Roger works with. I've used some of the tools that we use to talk to each other and to explain what my business does. And we've had a very different recruitment process. I mean, and so just very quickly what we did was we posted the jobs that were available, and I'm looking for salespeople predominantly. And the first interview for them was a 20-minute presentation on who they are and what their strengths are and what they feel they bring to the role, why BrandPath, and what they feel that they would bring to BrandPath. So 3 really simple questions, very, very powerful questions. And from accepting the CV and saying, yes, we want to talk to you, to coming to see me, we had a 50% dropout rate because people didn't come and do the work, right? Of the people that came, we had a phenomenal interview experience, because people who on paper looked to be fantastic candidates actually fell apart as part of this process and couldn't do it. And people that may have been not as good on paper because they haven't got a very polished CV, or they just haven't been to the right people to help promote themselves, actually came and shone through massively and did a fantastic job. And that's down to some of the stuff that I did with Roger, right? And my management team have never recruited that way. And they've seen a real change in the process. And we agreed yesterday that we will always now recruit this way because it's really good and it really works. So some of it is a little bit loosely connected, but I think the two processes go hand in hand, and particularly if you are inside an organisation, as Roger should be, then you need to be advising the seniors on the types of people they need, and you know, pointing out the gaps and helping them interview. Most people are terrible interviewers, me included. I hate interviewing. So if you've got somebody to help you with that, then that's great as well, right? And if they're giving you new techniques and if they're trying something a little bit different, they're introducing you to different talent pools of people that happen to sit in Roger's pool of contacts, then it kind of creates its own momentum. You know, there will be recruiting that's nothing to do with Roger, and you know, kind of that mid to low level people he'll never get involved in. But if I was recruiting an exec, and I'm talking to him actually about somebody in Singapore that we might take this year as part of the growth of our business, I would work with Roger to do it as part of the process. So, yeah, but it is difficult, right, because some companies just have a mindset that say it's separated. But I think if Roger does what he can do and he does it well, I think that mindset changes over time as he builds more of a working relationship and a proper relationship with clients, that he's not just an outsourcer. He's part of their business going forwards, right, and that's how it has to work.
Yeah, it's funny because, I mean, so this type of engagement is definitely like a very long-term relationship, which I think, speaking back to sort of how do you productize something like this without it seeming like such a big investment, I'm just interested, do you have any thoughts on like how it might seem a little bit more approachable rather than saying, look, we're going to become such an indispensable part of your business that you can't stop paying us, essentially?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's the packaging of Roger's services into product bundles that are easier to swallow, as I said. So, you know, there might be some introductory stuff that he does, you know, breaking down. So if you take, how do I word this? I haven't really thought it through, actually. I'm giving myself a business idea at the moment, actually. If you break down the coaching process that you go through when you work with Roger and then you come out with a brand book and a positioning document and the other things that you do, right, that's a lengthy journey. And I think you can break that down into manageable chunks that introduces the concept in a light way. As I say, there's almost like a light version of Persona that is the company's introduction to it. You know, that's probably going to be a break-even or maybe even a loss leader for Roger, because, you know, he's going to want to throw that at companies that he sees him wanting a long-term relationship with, and he may have to have that he puts in all the work, right? That's probably going to be a lot of grunt work at the beginning to make sure that Roger and Persona have positioned themselves in the right way for every company, right? Because not everyone's the same, as we said. He's going to have a way of taking that light version to different markets for different people in a different way. And I think he's got that. I think in his own head, Roger sees that. I think you've probably then got that will be the hook that catches your immediate customers, that you then say, okay, well, there's now a stage 2 that you can buy that gives you the next 3 levels. And each one needs to tease the next one, right? And then obviously if you get to the end of that, then you're saying, okay, there's a longer term commitment here, guys, and we need to look at how we do this more often and how we become part of your business. BrandPath will have a very similar thing. So we have a light version of coming on board with us that we can do in 3 weeks. It hasn't got all the whistles and bells, but it means that you're online, you're selling, you're in local currency, local language, local payment system. And I can do that in 3 weeks. The other end of it is we build you a website that's bespoke to you. And of course that takes months. That's probably 3 months, not 3 weeks. It's a lot more costly because we're starting from scratch. And there's an awful lot more input required from the partner that you're working with, because they need to tell you what they want that website to look like. So that's kind of the way that I would view Persona, is that there's a light version that you can get on board real quick. It's probably 3 weeks' work, a month's work. Everybody comes out of it feeling really refreshed and feeling like they've learned something and like, wow, there is a different way to look at this. And, you know, there's then, I don't know what the conversion ratio would be, but there's a 1 in 5 will then take part 2, and then from that, 1 in 3 or 1 in 2 will take the big package. And then it's about how quickly Roger wants to grow the business and how much he wants to throw at the investment to get moving. Because then it's about numbers, right? You've got to have a team to deploy to go talk to all those people. And that's the stage I'm at now, is we're having to invest in people because there's not enough of us to go talk to clients now, so we've got to go bring in some more.
Yeah, that's a huge challenge, because then it's sort of like if your marketing strategy, in order to get that, you know, pipeline up and running, but it sounds like right now his marketing strategy is so personal, and there's not this, the network is the ideal where it would be word of mouth completely and you have this alumni network, but it's really not at scale yet.
Yes, I totally agree. 100% agree with everything you just said. That's his now challenge, right? And I guess that's why he's engaged you guys.
Yeah. So we're trying to figure out how we can, you know, I guess scale this sort of word of mouth growth that they've had so far, and either figure out how to do that online or figure out some way to replicate the honesty, you know, that he obviously gets such good recommendations via word of mouth. How can you replicate that using marketing? And it's difficult. It's difficult for sure.
Yeah, I guess for me, there's a big social media piece in there.
Yeah.
I think, you know, social media for him is a friend for sure. I think there's probably another trick that we've started to use heavily now is funding and deploying bloggers and writers into areas that we want them. And I think if Roger's got an ability through the social media growth to then find people that will write on his behalf, then that helps as well. And I think almost through those two pieces, and then some real rifle shot marketing campaigning. I mean, there's no way he can go scattergun approach to the market because it's just not big enough and it's not fit for that. But I think the third piece for him then is to begin some real targeted marketing as to the types of companies that he wants, reaching out to some organizations, maybe like Kickstarter, maybe like Indiegogo, these new entrants coming to market. You know, there are lots of these guys that work by putting, my hated word, mentors into, so lots of the angel funders will put a mentor into a business, right? And 9 times out of 10, it fails miserably, right? Because the mentor's got nothing to do with the business. He's got no skin in the game to make it successful. It's there for his ego more than anything else, right? So I think Roger's played maybe in there. But my view would be that he needs to start to create almost an ecosystem for himself, probably using that and tools that you guys know far better than me because you're the expert. But to create an ecosystem that is persona, some of that will be with partnerships with different organizations like a Kickstarter or, I don't know, he'll find, knowing Roger, he'll find something really random like a sports team to attach himself to, or a governing organization that adopts him. You know, I mean, what he does, and I think why he and I get along so well, is a lot of it relates to sport, and a lot of the ideas of team and group and mindset are all very sport-driven, and he and I both came up through school playing rugby, and both of us are triathletes, so it rings really true. Right? So finding a sports team that takes that approach, you know, might be a good way, a different way in, but I think he's going to, you and him have to build this from the ground up, right? Because it's new, and there isn't a market position I don't think that he can reach to that says, oh, if I go over there, there's going to be lots of people for me to talk to, right? Because I don't think he's got many head-to-head challenges in the space of what he's trying to do. There are loads of coaching companies, there are millions of recruitment companies, and there's lots of people who are willing to be a mentor or tell you what to do, right? I think the way that Roger's trying to come at it, if I'm reading it right, is a very individual approach that not everybody's going to take, but there's certainly a big enough market out there for him to go take a swing at and be successful with.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I know we're at time. Do you have to run off? I have like one more question.
I've got about another 5 minutes. I've got about another 5 minutes before I've got to run.
Awesome. I appreciate it. We've been playing with the idea of this as sort of like a you know, how do you create an analogy, and I think team building sports is a good analogy, but you know, is another analogy sort of the alternative to the executive MBA? What are your thoughts on that? Any thoughts at all?
Yeah, that's a good thought. I think as an alternative to, does it work as an MBA? I have to give that one some thought. That's really out there. Because it's not as, I think you've got to be careful with things like MBAs because they carry a educational weight to them that people, and I had somebody in an interview mention their MBA 8 times in 11 minutes, right? So people carry, they didn't get through the second interview, by the way. But a lot of people carry those like a badge, right? So I like the premise of being an alternative to education of a traditional nature. But I think MBA might be a bit dangerous because of the association to its educational weight and its meaningfulness to certain people around the industry. But I do like the idea of it being an alternative educational route. So there is something in that, but to my mind, I'd just be a bit careful about using MBA as a comparative.
Yeah. Interesting. And then my last question is, you know, you mentioned sort of the personal style being a key differentiator, but if you sort of had to encapsulate, because you mentioned you've been to several different business coaches before, what the key difference is between persona and other business coaches in like a sentence, what would it be?
I know it's hard. For me, it's Roger has an ability to make all of the technical stuff that he uses very, very personal. And he has an ability, and I think it's an innate ability, to tailor it to the individual. Business coaches can do that, but they still kind of wheel out the Jungian colour wheel or, you know, whatever methodology they're using and try and teach you outward from there. Roger makes that part of the process, and some of it I know he doesn't use for everybody because he tailors it to the individual. And for me, that's what made it so successful, is what he does is tailored to the individual. It's not out-of-the-box generic coaching stuff that I see all over the place.
That's awesome.
That's the thing you have to
keep.
Thank you so much. What you have to keep.
Yeah. Thank you so much for spending the time with us. It's been really interesting and really, we got some great stuff. My head is spinning with ideas.
No worries. If I can help further along the process, just let me know. I do sort of run around a bit, but I'll make time for it. If there's anything else I can do to support it, just let me know.
Yeah, thank you so much for offering. We may have things to run by you again.
No worries. Just let me know, yeah?
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
All right. Have a great day. Talk to you soon, yeah? Thanks.
Yeah, take care. Bye.